Metaplanet's MNAV recently dropped a little bit below a 1, and part of my short-term thesis on Metaplanet has actually been proven wrong, but I want to explain why that was proven wrong and also why I am still very bullish on Metaplanet, even though my short-term thesis has been proven wrong. So here's an explanation on my short-term thesis of Metaplanet and why it ended up being wrong. I originally thought that we would see cycles of MNAV expansion followed by MNAV compression because MNAV affects capital efficiency. So as MNAV goes up, as the valuation relative to the company's Bitcoin holdings goes up, then the company is able to buy more Bitcoin while diluting less shares. So their Bitcoin per share goes up exponentially, which justifies an increased MNAV. So I predicted that we would see these cycles where the MNAV would continuously go up. However, because as the company buys more Bitcoin over time, their Bitcoin torque goes down because they can get a smaller multiple on their Bitcoin holdings. So eventually the MNAV would have to come back down. And as the MNAV starts to go back down, the capital efficiency starts to decline because they'd be able to buy less Bitcoin and have to dilute more shares as the MNAV goes down. So I predicted we were going to see cycles of this MNAV expansion and then compression, and I predicted that these cycles would slowly shift towards an MNAV of 1. So we would see a large expansion of MNAV, MNAV compress, MNAV go back up, but not as high, MNAV go back down, MNAV go back up, but not as high again, MNAV go back down a little bit, and we would see that cycle go until the MNAV compressed towards an MNAV of around a 1. And then I also felt like in the short term, even if MNAV compressed to a 1, Metaplanet was heavily shorted, where shorts would either cover the short position or they would stay short. If they stayed short, it would cause a short squeeze just by letting Bitcoin's price rise, which would increase the share price. And then that increase in price would expand MNAV back up, their capital efficiency would go back up, and the cycle would continue back up. Now, if the shorts covered their positions, then that means that they would have to buy their shares, because when you're shorting a share or when you're shorting a stock, you're essentially borrowing shares and buying it later. So I figured that if the shorts covered their shares, then the price would start to go back up at that point, and the MNAV would expand back up, capital efficiency would go back up, and then the cycle would be able to reset. However, we have seen lots of shorts cover their positions, and we did not see that MNAV expand back up, so I was wrong about that. However, the long-term thesis remains intact, and I am still super bullish on Metaplanet long-term because it was part of the plan the whole time. After that short-term capital raising round, Metaplanet and other Bitcoin treasury companies want to shift towards utilizing credit instruments to be able to buy Bitcoin, and utilizing these credit instruments are not dependent on MNAV. So even if the MNAV is trading below a 1, Bitcoin treasury companies could still purchase Bitcoin accretively, meaning their Bitcoin per share will continue to rise. And even if their MNAV did start going below a 1, if they're able to use these credit instruments to increase their Bitcoin per share, the MNAV I don't think would sustainably stay below a 1, because how could the market justify valuing a company at less than the Bitcoin that they hold, as the company is being able to increase their Bitcoin per share regardless of what the MNAV says, even if the MNAV is below a 1. So I don't think that using credit instruments and accretively buying Bitcoin, I don't think the MNAV could sustainably stay below a 1 for these Bitcoin treasury companies. So looking at Metaplanet based on their presentation for their perpetual preferreds, they said that they want to cap their perpetual preferreds at a dividend of 6% per year. And looking at this, the equivalent MNAV would be dependent on Bitcoin's CAGR, not on their MNAV. So if Bitcoin was trading at, or if Bitcoin grew at 10% per year over the course of 10 years, using 6% perpetual preferreds, that would be equivalent to issuing the common stock at an MNAV of 1.62. If you're a little bit more bullish on Bitcoin, say you think that Bitcoin's gonna grow at a CAGR of 8.62, or sorry, at a CAGR of 30%, you would get an equivalent MNAV of 8.62. So these perpetual preferreds are extremely accretive and will increase Bitcoin per share. And it doesn't even matter what the MNAV is. MNAV could be trading below a one. It does not matter. It only matters that the only thing that matters is that Bitcoin goes up. And Metaplanet's execution to shift towards these perpetual preferreds has been phenomenal, in my opinion. They saw that their MNAV was getting compressed, and it didn't look like it was going to go back up even after the shorts had covered their position. So they said, we'll take advantage while we can. We are going to raise a whole bunch of capital while we still can, while it's still going to be, it wasn't necessarily super accretive for shareholders, but it wasn't necessarily dilutive for shareholders either. They were able to raise a whole bunch of capital to build up their balance sheet, buy a whole bunch of Bitcoin so that their balance sheet would be large enough to issue these perpetual preferreds at scale. So my updated thoughts on Metaplanet, long term, I am still very bullish on Metaplanet. However, there has been a loss of Bitcoin torque, basically meaning that Metaplanet has multiplied their Bitcoin holdings pretty significantly without significantly increasing their Bitcoin per share relative towards how much Bitcoin they multiplied their Bitcoin holdings by. And at the end of the day, what really matters is the multiple in Bitcoin per share. Since they were buying a lot of Bitcoin at a relatively low MNAV, they were slightly increasing their Bitcoin per share, but not significantly. So there has been a loss in Bitcoin torque. So I am a little bit less bullish than I was like 6 months ago. Short term, I don't see any bullish momentum in the near term until these perpetual preferreds get issued or there's an announcement that these perpetual preferreds will start getting issued. And I also think that the market has not priced these perpetual preferreds in. How could the market be valuing a company at the value of the Bitcoin that they hold if they also have this potential for perpetual preferreds in the future? So I believe that there is a short-term possibility that the MNAV goes below a one just because these perpetual preferreds are not yet being issued and the market's not pricing these in. But once the perpetual preferreds get rolling, Bitcoin per share will continue to rise again. And if the Bitcoin per share rises again, even with an MNAV below a one, there's no way that the MNAV would sustainably stay below a one. So that is my current outlook on Metaplanet. So short term, I could see it staying put for a little bit, maybe go down a little bit more. But long term, I am still very bullish on Metaplanet. So this is how I view what Metaplanet was versus what it will be. Metaplanet was and will continue to be a Bitcoin leveraged play, but the way the leverage is used differs. The more the company went up relative to its Bitcoin holdings, the more profitable the leverage was for Metaplanet because when MNAV expanded, they were able to buy more Bitcoin while diluting less shares. So their Bitcoin per share grew exponentially. So it was better leverage with better market valuations. Now, what Metaplanet will be, it's still going to be a leveraged play, but rather than it being based on the market valuation of the company going up, it's more based on how much Bitcoin goes up. So the more Bitcoin goes up, the better the leverage is. And for Metaplanet specifically, it's just like taking on debt to be able to buy more Bitcoin over time, but they have access to, in my opinion, the best debt possible with these perpetual preferreds because they're in Japan, which is yield starved and has high demand for these like dividend products. So with these perpetual preferreds that are capping out at 6% dividends, that is just really good debt to be able to take on and use as leverage to buy more Bitcoin accretively. And if someone were to tell me that I could have $10,000 to buy Bitcoin and only had to pay back $600 per year with no maturity date, which is essentially what these perpetual preferreds are, a 6% dividend, no maturity date. And not only that, but I had the income and the future income sources in the works to be able to easily pay off that dividend because Metaplanet also is profitable with their ability to sell put options and with Project Nova, their future income that they'll be able to get. I would definitely take that debt. But even if this long-term thesis fails and these perpetual preferreds somehow do not work out, say there's not enough demand for these perpetual preferreds, which wouldn't really make sense because they're in Japan and would have literally like the highest demand for these instruments. But say in the unlikely scenario, these perpetual preferreds do not work out, Metaplanet still has alternative instruments by having a profitable business where they're selling these put options and are very profitable from that. And they're also working on Bitcoin.jp and Project Nova to generate more income. They could just take those profits, put it straight into Bitcoin, increase their Bitcoin per share, with them being valued right now at just their Bitcoin holdings. How could the price not go up? Of course, these are my own thoughts. This is my own thesis on Metaplanet's future. That's my conviction. Find your own conviction. We have seen lots of people lose a lot of money from borrowing other people's convictions. So this is not financial advice. My name is Ian Gillespie. Please consider liking and subscribing to support my work and to support this channel.